the Super Bowl has just passed by this Sunday on February the 13th, and it's just another example of the long march of capturing all of the institutions. The NFL, as I'm sure many of you are aware, has long been a place where wokeism has thrived. In fact, the NFL and Colin Kaepernick is where this whole kneeling business started in the first place. Although at least back in 2016, when all that started, the NFL had the good decency to say, no, you can't do that. That's disrespectful to the national anthem and the nation. But now they're openly endorsing it, as we will find out. One of the first things I'd like to point out regarding all of this is the classic hypocrisy of all of the elites and all of the establishment breaking their own rules when it comes to mask wearing. So I've got this article up here, The Post-Millennial, talking about LA Mayor Eric Garcetti defying his own public health guidance and going maskless to the Super Bowl. So just for a bit of context, I believe LA currently has one of the strictest mask mandates going on, where even school children are still having to wear masks, whether or not that is effective or not.
And bear in mind, it's for a disease that barely affects children.
Yes, it absolutely is. And I think one of the recommendations that went out citywide was that if you were going to the Super Bowl, you should wear a mask to prevent the spread of COVID. But of course, even the mayor didn't really stick to it and had some pretty ridiculous excuses as to why. So the LA Department of Health issued an advisory prior to Sunday's big game saying that face masks would be required at the stadium in an attempt to curb the spread. Eric Garcetti, the restriction-crazed mayor, showed up to the Super Bowl to root for his hometown Rams and notably did not wear a mask. Garcetti recently claimed that when he was unmasked at the NFC Championship game between the San Francisco 49ers and Los Angeles Rams, just as a heads up as well, by the way, I have no idea who any of these teams are. I'm not particularly into English football, let alone disgusting American football. So you're going to have to just bear with us here. I don't know how interested you are.
I'm not really interested. Too many numbers, too many stats. It's like watching an Excel spreadsheet. It's too stoppy-starty. I don't like regular football. The only decent sports are ones where people are fighting.
Yeah, I'll agree with you there. I mean, to be fair, these guys run into each other and ram into each other. That's close enough to fighting.
They do give themselves a lot of spinal injuries and head injuries that lead to behavioural problems later in life, and then they murder their families and stuff, which I guess is slightly entertaining, but mostly. Sports where people aren't fighting are boring. And if a fight broke out at the Super Bowl, everybody would turn around and watch the fight because fights are more interesting.
And that's why people watch hockey, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so it was 2 Sundays ago. It was also at the same stadium that he was watching this game, but apparently, supposedly, he was simply holding his breath. Perhaps whilst...
Why isn't that an option for everybody? Why can't I do that on the train?
Yeah,
I don't wear a mask on the train anyway because I'm exempt. Because if you say you're exempt, you don't have to wear a mask. It's an amazing system. But like, why can't I just hold my breath everywhere? If I get stopped, I'll just be like, no, I'm holding my breath.
Well, I mean, the COVID can't get to me if I'm holding my breath.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when I explain that I'm holding my breath, I'll have to stop holding my breath.
Remember, if COVID comes near and you're not wearing a mask, you just say no.
Yeah.
That's the classic. I wore my mask the entire game, and when people ask for a photograph, I hold my breath and I put it up here, and people can see that, he said. There's a 0% chance of infection from that, he continued. I put my mask right back on to make sure that there is no spread, and I think that we should all follow that advice until we're out of this period. So school children...
I missed that bit of the advice. That advice was never given out. It never said, like, oh, you can take the mask off if you hold your breath.
Yeah,
I've never seen that advice.
It's safe for specifically the amount of time I have my mask off for.
Yeah.
Any other time, it's deadly, but safe when I do it. So school children of LA, remember, if you need to wear a mask and you don't have one on you, just hold your breath.
Yeah.
Just what's the danger? Just hold your breath.
And on a serious, very serious note, the masks are causing huge problems in schools and with young children. So children are starting to speak at a later and later age because they can't see people's... You learn to speak from watching somebody's lips.
We actually have an article on that written by, I think, a neuroscientist talking about the neurological development of being able to recognize emotions within people's faces and just talking about how it's really affecting these children's ability to empathize with one another. Yeah. And it's even worse because in LA, the restrictions aren't just so that you have to wear the normal cloth masks. They have to wear like basically airtight, sealed, heavy-duty masks as well. Yeah, so it's not great. But we've just got loads of examples of all the different celebrities and establishment elites being at this being at this game without masks. So we can just scroll through a few of them here. John, if you want to move along. No, the next tab. So here's just a video here. There's Matt Damon without a mask and somebody else. I forget who that is. That might be the mayor himself. some celebrities. Thanks as well. There's LeBron James, of course, probably holding back tears.
Why did he cry?
He cries at everything. Charlize Theron, Libs of TikTok, Mark Wahlberg, doing a great job of keeping track of all of this. Sean Penn, all of whom are, as we all know, liberal Hollywood elites who would probably condemn you to death for not wearing a mask around them. And we could just scroll through a few more of these if we just keep moving along, John. Here's just a spreadsheet almost of all of them. You've got Ellen in the top left corner, Cardi B's there, not Mark Wahlberg. What's the name of that guy who plays himself in every... Ryan Reynolds, Snoop Dogg, loads of people, all of them completely maskless against LA's strict guidelines that said otherwise. And let's just keep going to see what people are saying. Yeah, there's Ellen...
that was Boris Johnson.
Close enough. There's Ellen in a crowd and then Ellen's crowd itself, which, as we can see, is all completely masked because it's very, very dangerous when other people don't have their masks on. But when these people don't, it just sort of skirts around them.
She could be played by Christopher Eccleston in a film.
Oh, God, she could. Is this the new Doctor transformation? Is this the regeneration? Anyway, if we keep going, let's just take a look at some more of these people. You've got the youth orchestra, the LA Youth Orchestra, which are all having to wear masks, except for the singers, because that makes sense. I mean, we've seen images of those people who are like having to play their horn instruments through like little slots in their masks. Why aren't these singers wearing masks with just a little mouth flap on them?
Masks are just for the little people.
If we keep going along as well, we can see that people are actually fighting back against this, where as the game was going on, some plane flew over and decided to write this wonderful message in the sky that just says, "Unmask our kids." And, it may be a bit of a superficial gesture, but it's still something, isn't it? The people are trying to fight back. There's...
I wonder how long it took for that to be described as far-right neo-Nazism.
Oh, I'm sure it was as people were going just on the grounds. They were probably just whispering it to one another. Did you see that Wermac fighter just writing in the sky above us? Let's move along again. The other thing that was funny about this was that The Rock decided he was going to show up after being fresh from stabbing Joe Rogan in the back. He decided to open up this instead, where he Libs of TikTok pointing out that he says, "Ladies and gentlemen," and they are in LA. What about all the non-binary people? This is not very inclusive, Mr. The Rock. Sorry, one moment. There we go. And if we go along again, I just included this. This is just a funny clip that people can watch if they want to remember The Rock backstabbed Joe Rogan about saying the N-word when there's some hilarious clips of The Rock from his old WWE days speaking Chinese in quotation marks. In fact, just play a bit of this clip, John, if you just want to click on it, just so we can hear.
Look at... Okay, if The Rock didn't run over Stone Cold, then who did? Who's going to step forward?
Now, Mick, if you need even further clarification, let The Rock tell you in Chinese.
And look at Chinese?
Jing bang ding dong, he's Stone Cold.
That wouldn't fly nowadays.
Oh my God, that's an actual hate crime.
It's ridiculous.
That's what we need.
Oh my goodness.
Just close that now. I think the LAPD needs to be on that right now. He might still be in the city. There's still time.
I hope he isn't ever working again. I mean, he needs to be cancelled. Same as Stuart Lee, who says the N-bomb a huge number of times in a comedy set recorded at the Stand.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Fair play. But it wasn't the masks and it wasn't the hypocrisy that was the only thing that we saw at the Super Bowl. There was also, of course, woke virtue signaling from Eminem, of all people. A man who, if I cast my mind back to when I was 3 years old, a time I remember greatly, was accused of appropriating black culture back in the late 90s when he started, when his career started, and people were saying white people aren't allowed to rap. The only white rapper I recognize is Vanilla Ice.
And bear in mind, he did actually appropriate black culture. And also, his whole shtick was, God sent me to piss the world off. So it was, he was there to agitate and push back against the orthodoxy. Yeah, and now he's kneeling to the orthodoxy.
Well, I mean, he's still agitating the normal people. He's still pissing me off, so...
You're not normal, though.
Oh, cheers.
I'm talking about the sort of, the mainstream...
The normies, yeah.
Yeah,
that's fair. But Eminem decided it was his time to say no to oppression and racial prejudice in the US and decided to take a knee in the middle of the Super Bowl 2022 halftime show, despite the fact that supposedly there'd been leaks saying that you weren't supposed to do that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really seem to hold any water if we carry on. So Eminem sent a message.
And he's going to be releasing a German polka album.
Oh, really?
And
I'm sure that will
in
fly.
recognition of his whiteness.
I would hope so. Eminem sent a message by kneeling in the middle of the Super Bowl halftime show on Sunday after reports surfaced earlier in that day stating the NFL would not allow the rapper to do so. The Lose Yourself entertainer kneeled during the end of the show after performing alongside Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Kendrick Lamar, and Mary J. Blige. Now, why didn't he let Kendrick? Why didn't he let Snoop take the knee? Surely this is just taking attention away from black voices and stealing the spotlight. This is a grave demonstration of white supremacy in the entertainment industry, Eminem, and you should be ashamed of yourself.
It'd be great if Mary J. Blige's middle name was Olivia.
I don't get that. Anybody out there, I'm sure you get that. So articles published earlier on Sunday suggested that the rapper would be barred from kneeling Colin Kaepernick style and that Dr. Dre would be censored from saying his lyric, "Still Not Loving the Police," while performing his song, Still Dre. But NFL spokesperson Brian McCarthy denied that certain elements of the performance caught anyone off guard. It was no surprise to us. We watched all the elements of the show during multiple rehearsals this week, and we're well aware that that was going to happen.
And it's such a middle-aged sort of, all this stuff, like obviously Dr. Dre, like back in the late 80s, when there was a huge amount of racial discrimination in Los Angeles, especially, from the police department and stuff, you can understand it was raw, they were young, it was from the streets. Now they're all billionaires, they're all middle-aged, and it's the most sort of orthodox, just...
Well, it's far less profitable to let go of all of that hatred that you've got in you.
Well, I don't think it's hatred anymore. I think it's trotting out these platitudes.
It's very performative.
Like F the police is a platitude now. It's just it's something that everybody says.
NWA really meant it when they first came out.
Yeah, that's when they met. That's when it was raw and angry, and now it's just a thing that they're doing to make money and because it's the right thing to say.
Well, yeah, it's the politically correct thing to say, absolutely. So NFL initially banned players and team personnel from sitting or kneeling during the national anthem, policy that was approved by all NFL team owners, save for the San Francisco 49ers owner Jed York back in 2018. The policy stated that players wishing to protest could just stay in the locker room. So just stay out of sight. Probably the best way to deal with it. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell said at the time that on-field protests created a false perception among many that thousands of NFL players were unpatriotic. And who would think that a communist, anti-American gesture like that would be unpatriotic? It wasn't until Black Lives Matter protests in 2020, after the police killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, that the NFL admitted that it was wrong for its treatments of players and personnel. We, the NFL, admit that we were wrong for not listening to NFL players earlier and encouraged all to speak out and peacefully protest. We, the NFL, believe that Black Lives Matter. So there you have it. If the NFL had been kneeling, perhaps Derek Chauvin wouldn't have been. And we can get a picture of...
Well, I've got to be honest, if George Floyd came back tomorrow, the last thing he'd want to see is people kneeling.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. But we can just see from the responses that some people have had that this sort of like token performative gesture doesn't really work for all of the race baiters out there because they're still not happy. You're still racist in their eyes. They will never be happy. Don't let the NFL's very black Super Bowl halftime show obscure the fact that it's still being sued by black coach Brian Flores, who said the NFL remains rife with racism. And this is from someone called Eminem Abanga. Remember the NFL blackballed Colin Kaepernick and Jay-Z's social justice initiative for the NFL and has produced zilch. So even if you're virtue signaling now, we don't care.
Fair point. It's all corporate window dressing. It's all just marketing for these people.
I agree.
Know what I mean?
I don't agree with the initial statements that the NFL is racist in the first place, given that I think if you were to take the demographics of their players,
but that's like saying slavery is not racist because look at the demographics of the people working in the fields.
Don't go all Colin Kaepernick on me. Come on, they're not slaves. They've got a choice to take.
They've got a choice. But I mean, there's if we're talking about power imbalances, people can still. Prince was getting paid millions of dollars. He still wrote slave in his face. So
that was performative as well.
So, like, I mean, I think the fact that it's white owned and they have black players, I mean, that's a sort of imbalance.
Is that not just how the cards have fallen due to the positions where people have decided to try and focus their efforts? Certain people have tried to get into the management, and then certain people have tried to get into the actual...
Well, certain people had the opportunity to get into the management because of structural racism.
Yeah,
no, I think there's a fair point there, and I think, but the point is this is all just woke window dressing. This is all the NFL just wants to be doing the right thing. Honestly, if
I do agree that if there are disparities that are being caused by actual prejudice, this is not actually solving
if
anything.
Biden had got in and pulled his mask off and been like, look, I'm an authoritarian dictator, instead of leaving his mask on and being, look, I'm an authoritarian dictator. But if they're an authoritarian dictator who, for example, they're an Islamic revolution, then the NFL would be making everybody pray instead of take the knee. You know what I mean? They're just doing whatever's the most politically expedient thing for them.
Yes, but the whole point is that they're very, very upset that a lot of the coaches are all white when the black players are now being controlled by the evil white coaches who are definitely doing it purely for the power, not so that they can just, help the teams strategize and win or anything like that. And this is a point that Colin Kaepernick made in that ridiculous Netflix documentary that was released a few months ago, where he literally compared the lineup for trying out for a team to the old slave markets, which is just a ridiculous comparison, because if you don't want to be an NFL player, you can just walk away.
Yeah, it's pretty offensive to slaves. And bear in mind, there's more slaves in the world now than there were at the peak of the transatlantic slave trade.
Yeah, these people are far, far too pent up on old injustices.
Yeah, nobody, because the old injustices, nobody can answer back. There's no argument. It's this tenet, you can go along with the flow. If you wanted to stop slavery now, you'd have to go to Libya, you'd have to go to African countries, the Middle East, China. You'd have to, go and deal with difficult people who have a lot of power. And and aren't just white. Now we've become accustomed to this mantra in the media that whiteness is evil, and so obviously if you confront slavery now, it's not being done by white people.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of it wasn't also being done by white people back in the day as well, because it was a global institution.
Yeah. Where do you think, they bought the slaves?
Where do you think the word slave comes from? Slav.
Yeah.
That's where it came from, because they were just known for being the slave population, the slave class. But anyway, there are other articles that you can find.
And the first slaves, indentured servitude, which is sort of like slavery. But you get your freedom back. You can sort of work and buy your freedom back after 7 years or something. The first indentured slaves in the Caribbean were Scots and Irish. But luckily we're terrible slaves because we're just totally sunburnt.
Well, what I know is that in America
and
they
so
used
lazy. They left us in the sugarcane plantation, came back the next day, we chopped all the sugarcane down and built a job centre out of it, and we're in there signing on.
Yeah, I mean.
But then also indentured servitude. You've got to come back to Aberdeen after 7 years working in Jamaica, cutting down sugarcane, and try and get a job in Aberdeen. And they're like, what skills have you got? And you're like, well, I'm really good at chopping down sugarcane. And they're like, well, all we've got is turnips.
Yeah. Anyway, there's another article that I've just got up here, which is just talking about, John, if you'd like to move along, just talking about Super Bowl's woke capitalism. So they're basically making the points that you're making, just saying that, if they actually wanted to address some kind of disparities, they wouldn't just be putting all this window dressing up.
It's window dressing. You know what I mean? I genuinely think, Colin Kaepernick, I don't agree with what he's done. I don't agree with taking the knee, but I think there is, some sort of structural racism in the NFL.
I would disagree without being presented with hard evidence, and a lot of it just seems...
All the rich guys are white. All the old rich guys.
All the black guys are rich as well.
Yeah, they're rich as well. They're rich as well, but they're rich for doing a different thing. They're rich for running around banging heads off each other.
You got paid millions of dollars for doing something else. Oh, this must be racism. What are you on about?
Anyway, I think, the coaches, what we see in the UK, where we don't have these issues, we don't have the sort of historic issues with race that the US has got, because, black people came here. They were invited here. They weren't,
I think we should probably just try and get through the rest of the...
But I think here we've got, you see many more, black coaches and things.
Yes, that's fair. But if we move along, Biden has also weighed into this, saying that the NFL hasn't lived up to its commitment. So now you've got the president of the United States himself deciding that he wants to weigh into the wokeness and agree with all of this. He's saying,
why is the president getting involved? This is more window dressing. This is more him waving to all his little blue-haired fans, being all like, hey, look, I'm doing something for Black Lives Matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Run the country. Run the country. Like,
I mean, how many compilations can you find of Biden saying the N-word?
Oh, man.
Quite a few. Quite a few, I'll just say that.
Yeah, Christ. If he was a stand-up comedian, he'd be cancelled by now.
Yeah. And of course, after any sort of sporting event, any football game, you have to have violence and riots, because after a sharing of peace and love throughout the country, trying to bring all the races, all the different people together under the banner of sport, everything always goes to chaos when people split down team lines and start rioting.
So are those Canadian truckers, I'm assuming, seen as they're the biggest threat to humanity?
They must be. They must be trying to throw an insurrection right there.
Yeah.
So you can see looting, people just running around the streets, smashing stuff. Move along, and we've got this video, which I think would be absolutely terrifying to be in this situation of just a man in a white truck. It does really bring back the videos of the LA riots that you saw from the early 90s. People just trying to drive through LA in a white truck, and loads of people just for no real reason jumping on it, stamping on it, presumably getting ready to sue him when he tries to drive off and they fall off. So peace and love has truly been brought. And just to really cap it all off, if we move along, there's this Getter post here from Drew Hernandez. Scroll down, just talking about how a rapper, Kodak Black, and 3 others were shot at a Justin Bieber concert over the weekend as well. So LA, ever the den of scum and villainy that it is.
How are they doing?
I don't know.
Imagine like there's a shooting at a Justin Bieber concert and they don't get Justin. That's the tragedy. That is the tragedy here.
But in the end, remember that when these celebrities, famous football stars and elites, when they make these gestures, they say that they're standing up to the establishment, but also they think they're standing up to you, the normal person out there. They're
standing in line with the establishment. All of it is they're just absolute. The people who are standing up to the establishment, like the Canadian truckers,
they're the normal people.
They're denounced as Nazis and fascists with the flimsiest connection. You know what I mean?
They're not actually standing up to the elites or the establishment. They are the elites and the establishment, and all of their friends are as well. They just hate the normal, average, on-the-ground people, and they think that you're all disgusting bigots. And the Super Bowl is just another example of that.
If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as this discussion that Carl and Luke Avery, /Lambda if you know him from YouTube, had about the wisdom of Ecclesiastes. And if you want to follow what else is coming out from Carl, you can follow him on Getter at Carl Benjamin. Thank you and goodbye.